First, then, which district in Bordeaux does this wine come from? That is not too difficult to guess. It is too light in the body to be either from Saint-Emilion or Graves. It is obviously a Medoc, no doubt about that. Now, from which commune in Medoc does it come? That also, by elimination, should not be too difficult to decide. Margaux? No, it cannot be Margaux. It has not the violent bouquet of a Margaux. Pauillac? It can't be Pauillac either. It is too tender, too gentle and wistful for a Pauillac. The wine of Pauillac has a character that is almost imperious in its taste. And also to me a Pauillac contains just a little pith, a curious, dusty, pithy flavour that the grape acquires from the soil of a district. No, this is a very gentle wine, demure and bashful in the first taste, emerging shyly but quite graciously in the second, a little arch perhaps in the second taste, and a little naughty also, teasing the tongue with a trace, just a trace of tannin. Then, in the aftertaste, delightful, consoling, and feminine, with a certain blithely generous quality that one associates only with the wines of the commune of Saint-Julien. Unmistakably, this is a Saint-Julien. He leaned back in his chair, held his hands up level with his chest, and placed the fingertips carefully together. He was becoming ridiculously pompous, and I thought some of it was deliberate, simply to mock his host. I found myself waiting rather tensely for him to go on. The girl Louise was lighting a cigarette. Pratt heard the match strike, and he turned on her, flaring suddenly with real anger. "Please," he said, "please don't do that. It's a disgusting habit to smoke at table." She looked at him, still holding the burning match in one hand, the big, slow eyes settling on his face, resting there a moment. Moving away again, slow and contemptuous, she bent her head and blew out the match, but continued to hold the unlighted cigarette in her fingers. "I'm sorry, my dear," Pratt said, "but I simply cannot have smoking at table." She didn't look at him again. "Now, let me see. Where were we?" he said. "Ah, yes. This wine is from Bordeaux, from the commune of Saint-Julien, in the district of Medoc. So far, so good. But now we come to the more difficult part. The name of the vineyard itself. For in Saint-Julien there are many vineyards, and, as our host so rightly remarked earlier on, there is not much difference between the wine of one and the wine of another. But we shall see." He paused again, closing his eyes. "I am trying to establish the growth," he said. "If I can do that, it'll be half the battle. Now, let me see. This wine is obviously not from a first-growth vineyard, nor even a second. It is not a great wine. The quality, the what do you call it, the radiance, the power, is lacking. But a third growth, that it could be. And yet I doubt it. We know it is a good year. Our host has said so. And this is probably flattering it a little bit. I must be careful. I must be very careful here." He picked up his glass and took another small sip. "Yes," he said, sucking his lips. "I was right. It is a fourth growth. Now I am sure of it. A fourth growth from a very good year. From a great year, in fact. And that's what made it taste almost like a third, or even a second growth wine. Good, that's better. Now we are closing in. What are the fourth growth vineyards in the commune of Saint-Julien?" Again he paused, took up his glass, and held the rim against that sagging, pendulous lower lip of his. Then I saw the tongue shoot out, pink and narrow, tip of it dipping into the wine, withdrawing swiftly again. A repulsive sight. When he lowered the glass, his eyes remained closed, the face concentrated, only the lips moving, sliding over each other like two pieces of wet, spongy rubber. "There it is again," he cried. "Tannin in the middle taste, and the quick astringent squeeze upon the tongue. Yes, yes, of course. Now I have it. This wine comes from one of those small vineyards around Becherville. I remember now, the Becherville district, and the river, and the little harbour that is silted up so that the wine ships can no longer use it. Becherville. Could it actually be a Becherville itself? No, I don't think so. Not quite, but it is somewhere very close. Chateau Talbot? Could it be Talbot? Yes, it could. Wait one moment." He sipped the wine again, and out of the side of my eye I noticed Mike Schofield, and how he was leaning farther and farther forward over the table, his mouth slightly open, his small eyes fixed upon Richard Pratt. No, I was wrong. It is not a Talbot. A Talbot comes forward to you just a little quicker than this one. The fruit is nearer to the surface. If it is a 34, which I believe it is, then it couldn't be a Talbot. Well, let me think. It is not a Becherville, and it is not a Talbot, and yet it is so close to both of them, so close that the vineyard must be almost in between. Now, which could that be?" He hesitated, and we waited, watching his face. Everyone, even Mike's wife, was watching him now. I heard the maid put down the dish of vegetables on the sideboard behind me, gently, so as not to disturb the silence. "Ah!" he cried. "I have it! Yes, I think I have it!" For the last time he sipped the wine, then, still holding up the glass, near his mouth, he turned to Mike and he smiled, a slow, silky smile, and he said, "You know what this is? This is the little Chateau Blanere de Cru." Mike sat tight, not moving, and the year 1934. We all looked at Mike, waiting for him to turn the bottle round in its little basket and show the label. "Is that your final answer?" Mike said. "Yes, I think so." "Well, is it or isn't it?" "Yes, it is." "What was the name again?" "Chateau Blanere de Cru. Pretty little vineyard. Lovely old chateau. Know it quite well. Can't think why I didn't recognize it at once." "Come on, Daddy," the girl said. "Turn it around and let's have a peek. I want my two houses." "Just a minute," Mike said. "Wait just a minute." He was sitting very quiet, bewildered-looking, and his face was becoming puffy and pale, as though all the force was draining slowly out of him. "Michael," his wife called sharply from the other end of the table, "what's the matter?" "Keep out of this, Margaret, will you please?" Richard Pratt was looking at Mike, smiling with his mouth, his eyes small and bright. Mike was not looking at anyone. "Daddy!" his daughter cried, agonized. "But, Daddy, you don't mean that he's guessed it right?" "Now, stop worrying, my dear," Mike said. "There's nothing to worry about." I think it was more to get away from his family than anything else. Then Mike then turned to Richard Pratt and said, "I'll tell you what, Richard. I think you and I'd better slip off in the next room and have a little chat." "I don't want a little chat," Pratt said. "All I want is to see the label on that bottle." He knew he was the winner now. He had the bearing, the quiet arrogance of a winner, and I could see that he was prepared to become thoroughly nasty if there was any trouble. "What are you waiting for?" he said to Mike. "Go and turn it round." Then this happened. The maid, the tiny, erect figure of the maid in her white and black uniform, was standing beside Richard Pratt, holding something out in her hand. "I believe these are yours, sir," she said. Pratt glanced around, saw the pair of thin, horn-rimmed spectacles that she held out to him. For a moment he hesitated. "Are they? Perhaps they are. I don't know." "Yes, sir. They're yours." The maid was an elderly woman, nearer 70 than 60. a faithful family retainer of many years' standing. She put the spectacles down on the table beside him. Without thanking her, Pratt took them up and slipped them into his top pocket, behind the white handkerchief. But the maid didn't go away. She remained standing beside and slightly behind Richard Pratt, and there was something so unusual in her manner and the way that she stood there, small, motionless, and erect, that I, for one, found myself watching her with a sudden apprehension. Her old grey face had a frosty, determined look. Her lips were compressed, the little chin was out, and the hands were clasped together tight before her. The curious cap on her head and the flush of white down in front of her uniform made her seem like some tiny, ruffled, white-breasted bird. "You left them in Mr. Schofield's study," she said. Her voice was naturally, deliberately polite. "On top of the green filing cabinet in his study, sir, where you happened to go in there by yourself before dinner." It took a few moments for the full meaning of her words to penetrate, and in the silence that followed I became aware of Mike, and how he was slowly drawing himself up in his chair, and the colour coming to his face, and the eyes opening wide, and the curl of the mouth, and the dangerous little patch of whiteness beginning to spread around the area of the nostrils. "Now, Michael," his wife said, "keep calm. Now, Michael, dear, keep calm."